I live stream reading the Bible almost every day. We just finished Acts the other day. So here's a video about 3 things that I learned from reading through Acts. Number 1, the early church's generosity. And just to be fair, I already made a video about this, but I just cannot not have it in this video. The early church's generosity was radical. It is amazing to read about. It's so fascinating. For example, if you read Acts 2:42 to 47, we see some of this radical generosity. I got my ESV Bible right here, so let's read it. And they devoted themselves to the apostle teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayer. And all came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. They had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the number day by day those who were being saved. In this Bible verse alone, we see some of their radical generosity. They were having all things in common, and they sold their possessions and belongings and distributed the proceeds to everyone who had any need. That is amazing. We can also read in Acts 4:34 to 35 a little bit of their radical generosity there too. And it says, there was not a needy person among them, for as many as were owners of lands or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold and laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. So again, we see the same thing. They were so generous with one another, and they really cared for one another, and they had love for one another. On to number 2, the way they preached the good news. In Acts, we see the good news being preached a lot, and the way it's being preached stood out to me. They would tell it in different ways to different people, and I think this also comes from Paul in 1 Corinthians 9:19 to 23, which says, for though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, not being outside the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessing. To take that Bible passage right there and put that into Acts, how we can see that being lived out in Acts, you see that the apostles would preach the gospel different ways to different people. And when they preach the gospel and when they preach the good news, they so often tell stories from the Bible, so they can see the full picture what the Bible, who God truly is, who Jesus really is. So whoever the apostle would speak to and evangelize to, they would truly understand the full picture of the good news. The apostles would never just tell someone Jesus loves you, because they wouldn't tell the full picture. It's just so fascinating to read about how when they were sharing the gospel with these people, they would share it differently with these people. When you think about it, it really makes sense. The Jews would know the law really, really well. For them, they already knew the law. They just didn't believe in Jesus. They thought that Jesus was fake. You have to share it differently to someone that never heard of the gospel. The Jews would have a different obstacle than the Gentiles. And I want to shout out a couple people that shares the gospel really well, that see people coming to Christ all the time. So one is Ray Comfort. I can put a link in the description for Ray Comfort channel. And then also needgod.net. Ryan and his team is doing an amazing job sharing the gospel as well. You see, both of them are sharing the full picture of the gospel, helping people understand the gospel, reaching them where they need to be reached. The third thing that stood out to me reading Acts is that they would always make sure to give God the glory. Giving God the glory for them was so important. I have 3 Bible verses we're going to look into right here. First one is Acts 3:11 through 13. While he clung to Peter and John, all the people, utterly astounded, ran together to them in the portico called Solomon's. And when Peter saw it, he addressed the people. Men of Israel, why do you wonder at this? Or why do you stare at us as though by our own power or piety we have made him walk? The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, the God of our fathers, glorified his servant Jesus, whom you delivered over and denied in the presence of Pilate when he had decided to release him. So clearly in this passage you can see how they would not take any glory for themselves, but they would give God all the glory. So it's very important for them to not take any glory to themselves. So next one is Acts 10:25 through 26. When Peter entered, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him. But Peter lifted him up, saying, "Stand up, I too am a man." So immediately the first thing he said was, "Don't worship me. I am just a man. I am not the one that is to be glorified here." They're not taking any glory away from God. The last and third I want to show you guys about this is Acts 14:11 through 15. And when the crowd saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying in Lycaonian, "The gods have come down to us in the likeness of men." Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul Hermes, because he was the chief speaker. And the priests of Zeus, whose temple was at the entrance to the city, brought oxen and garlands to the gates and wanted to offer sacrifice with the crowds. But when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard of it, they tore their garments and rushed out into the crowd, crying out, "Men, why are you doing these things? We also are men of like nature with you, and we bring you good news, that you should turn from these vain things to a living God who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that is in them." There's so much more to read from this Bible verse there. It's very interesting. They were trying to worship other gods, which is a big no-no. If you read the Old Testament, it's a big no-no to worship other gods. I don't know why I didn't read this earlier, but I should have read this too. The two Bible verses before. It says, he listened to Paul speaking, and Paul, looking intently at him, seeking that he had faith to be made well, said in a loud voice, "Stand upright on your feet." And he sprang up and began walking. You see there, some healing happened right there in front of their eyes. They're saying like, "Ooh, these are gods," making them gods basically. And then they're saying, "We are not gods, we're just men. We didn't do the healing that you saw right there. God did the healing." They gave God all the glory. In all things we do, we gotta give God the glory. Never take the glory for ourselves, for what God does. Let me know if you saw some other things reading through Acts as well. I'd be very interested to hear what you saw reading through Acts. Just let me know in a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.